Day. I got some announcements, the usual protocol, guys. Okay, washrooms. I think you're all covered by that. Again, we want you to drink more water. Remember, the front desk closes at 7, but tonight it's open because we have the wellness night. And remember, again, the live auction. We've got some donations. All are appreciated. And if you want to donate something or donate a session, that's coming up tomorrow night.
Where is that?
The live auction's going to be at lunchtime, right, Kathy?
Yes, lunchtime
During
tomorrow.
the luncheon.
Where's the sheet where I can, offer my services?
Okay, see Karen for that, right?
Or
Karen
Linda.
Or Linda.
You can see me for that.
Okay.
All right.
If you can write down at the
EnKA booth,
downstairs,
or displaying some of
with all the marketplace.
silent auction items, if there's something.
And to remind you, downstairs we have a marketplace where there's lots of neat, wonderful things.
How do you get there?
Well, the back
Follow
room,
the
right
signs.
across and downstairs is right not far. We tried to have it closer, but
Next to
no, it's inside. Just
Oh,
out the
it's
door
between the
sideways.
Okay, it's between the computer
It's
and
marked. There's signs
and
that we have
ladies'
well
room.
marked. Remember, the hotel shuttle will take you within, I think it's a 3-mile radius, drop you off and pick you up. Check out your post-conference workshops. And
And they're downstairs too?
the post-conference workshop.
Yeah, to sign up for
They're
those.
listed in your catalog.
They're in
Yes,
the catalog.
sign up.
And
You
hand
can
that
sign
in
up.
to either Linda or Karen or I.
Okay.
Okay? The wellness evening is tonight. We've invited half of Santa Fe. We went out for supper last night. There's lots of people coming. If you'd like to come, we'll be in the back room and donate your time. EnKA gives back to the community. We've got some children coming. We've got all kinds of people with all kinds of stuff. So just be here, and we're going to have a sign-up sheet if someone wants to work on backs or hips, or I've got some kids coming with autism and things. So give back and show them what we can do. Now, we have an annual general meeting tomorrow. It's where the board answers to the membership in the areas of finance, accreditation, certification, membership, projects, and to answer any questions you want to bring to us.
It's today.
Oh, it's today. Sorry.
10:45.
It's at 10:45 today. There we go.
Yeah, after a break.
I'm just going to put it off till tomorrow, but I guess we can. Okay. Anything else? Okay, I'm going to introduce this wonderful gentleman, which I've known for quite a while, actually. Yeah, it's been awesome. Hugo is from Australia, and he has all kinds of new things going on as usual, writing courses, and he's gotten married, has a beautiful wife. We've met at a couple of the conferences. There's a new system. I got to make sure I say this right, Hugo. It's a system. You tell me.
In Australia, there's a government accredited qualifications now in kinesiology, and about a couple of years ago, I fitted my system into that model, and now we're offering these qualifications not only in Australia, but you can do them here in the States, in Salt Lake City with Ron, who has the American college.
So, as you know, Hugo's always into new things. We've seen a lot of his work with amazing results. He blows our minds away every time. We're so glad to have him back. So, welcome, and I'll give you the floor.
Okay,
so
thank
I can
you.
learn something. And don't forget your papers. Please pass them in at the end of every session. Alrighty? And we'll have a place at the back for them. Okay.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, good morning everyone, and thank you for taking the time to come here and listen to me. Today I'm going to talk about, I'm going to talk about a few things, because when I originally prepared this I didn't realise I was getting an hour and a half, so I'm going to add something at the end which is a surprise. But this paper is about conditioning and trauma. I wrote it with my wife, actually, who could not be here. Alexandra's a psychologist and doing training in trauma. And we've come up with we wanted to explore a bit about trauma, but also understand what it is, because many people say in kinesiology, oh, you've got a trauma, but that's not what a real trauma, or what a true definition of trauma is. So we wanted to clarify that and then show you a way one balancing method for balancing trauma, which what we find is people with trauma always have a deficiency in the water element. So I've got an acupressure technique that you can actually show your clients to do, so they can do it over time, and it's just holding a few points. But it's under, you have to test and find out which are the right ones, and I'll show you how to do that. Okay. But usually when people have trauma, what happens is there's some kind of incidents in their life that have created it. And what we came to understand is that people with traumas actually have a conditioning to a conditioned stimulus that created it. For instance, if often you have people that have suffered abuse as children, or if someone was at war, they've been in the army and gone to war, for instance, and so there could be certain sounds or visual stimulus that create a neurological response in the body which is consistent with trauma. And this is what a conditioned stimulus is. A conditioned stimulus is what should be a neutral stimulus that's attached to a pathway that goes into the brain and creates a fear response normally. There's other kinds of conditioning, because you can condition for, like Pavlov's dog was the most famous one, where he conditioned the dog for the sound of the bell to think he was going to get food, so he would salivate the dog, and that's how that's why they call it Pavlovian conditioning. But what we're interested in is specifically the pathways with fear. And a couple of years ago, a paper came out in, I think it was Scientific American, about how they discovered a pathway within the amygdala part of the brain that actually can extinguish the conditioned stimulus. And so I'm going to show you this pathway and how it works today. And also, but how this conditioning can come back, because you don't fully, truly extinguish it. You can only extinguish it in terms of certain contexts. So for instance, a common example I use, if you go down to a tree, say there's an apple tree by a lake, and you go up to the apple tree and you go to get an apple, but there's a snake in there. So you get, oh my God, a snake. So next time you see an apple tree, you're like, ooh, is there a snake in there? So that you're conditioned, just like that. And it's there to help you survive, because that's a threat to your life. And it's a survival mechanism. But what happens, you can learn that, well, this tree over here, there is no snakes. So you can eventually walk up to this tree and say, I can get an apple and not have a problem. But if you go somewhere else, your brain will remember the context. Well, maybe there might be a snake in there. So again, you might be a bit careful, because you do have this memory of it. And that's important too. So this whole pathway, how it works, is very important. Okay? So that's basically what I'm going to talk about. I've got some information here in the manual which you can read. It's about what is a trauma. This is what Alexandra put together. So for instance, like ICD-10, this is the International Classification of Disease by the World Health Organization. Their definition of trauma is: the affected have been in a short or long-term situation which has been especially threatening more than usual, or have been exposed to a catastrophic event which would lead to deep despair within a person. Now, it's contextual. Say if you're in a car accident. Now, if you're just an average Joe and you're driving along and your car rolls over and you're unhurt and you get out, you could be traumatised for the rest of your life. And I've seen that. But if you're a stunt man and your car rolls over and you get out and you go, well, that was cool, what are we going to do now, mate? Well, it looks like I need a new car. Damn, man. But so it's contextual. What is a trauma for one person isn't for someone else. And that's very important to remember, because you mightn't understand how someone can be traumatised by it, but if they are, it's real for them. And that's important to understand that. The other definition comes from the DSM-4, which comes from the American Psychiatric Association. Their their definition is experience, view or confronted with one or more situations which lead to a real or near death or serious injury or threat to the physical safety of yourself or someone else. The reaction includes intense fear, helplessness or horror. With children, depending on the circumstances, you can get agitated behaviour. Okay? So that's the definitions of trauma and the two most commonly used classification systems. Okay? And so this can be, you know, what it causes intense fear in one person can be completely clear in someone else. So now, there's different experiences that can create traumas. There's a number of ways there's been classified. This is one that we came up with. This is from Schellong, which is a German author. Alexandra's Austrian, so she reads a lot of German literature, and one of her colleagues recommended this system. So you've got type 1 traumas, which are single event, and type 2, which are repetitive and long-lasting. Okay? And so the single events, they're life-threatening, unexpected. Type 2, repetitive, long-lasting, unforeseen. This could be like abuse over a period of time. Type 1, car accidents. You know, work-related accidents. And there you've got some different classifications within there. So that is in your manual, so you can read that. Now, the symptoms of trauma, according to ICD-10, which again, everything I'm putting up here is in there. So no extra pieces of paper. It's all there. So you've got acute stress, post-traumatic stress disorder, adjustment disorders, dissociative disorders, enduring personality changes, traumatic associative disorders. And so there's a lot of them. We just picked one for an example of post-traumatic stress disorder. And this, in the spirit of DSM and ICD, it's a life-threatening situation that results in helplessness, very severe, not able to cope or integrate. And some of the symptoms of this, you know, like you have recurring and vividly charged memories of the event or flashbacks, okay? Also recurring dreams, nightmares, avoidance behaviour or numbing, like you feel numb, hyperarousal, feeling of helplessness, speechless, cognitive dissonance, okay? So they're all complicated things, but so there's three major obstacles for post-traumatic stress disorder. This is not in there because this is later Alexandra and I, when she couldn't come, she had to get it in my mind so I understood it properly. And this is how I understood it. Okay. Post-traumatic stress disorder only suffered after a traumatic experience. You have hyperarousal, which is a constant state of vigilance. Okay. Avoidance behaviour of situations related to the traumatic event, and flashbacks. They have to have all three for you to have post-traumatic stress. Okay? Okay? All three. Now, what's interesting with Alexandra discussed this with one of her colleagues, who's one of the top psychologists in Germany. And she wanted to know all about the kinesiology, what the effects of it, and everything. And what her observation is that kinesiology can affect the hyperarousal. That's where we work. We don't affect the other things. The other things will change over time because we can change the hyperarousal. So with kinesiology, we can change their states of energy. So if someone's hyperarousal, we can calm them down. Or if someone's like this, we can bring them up. Okay, that's what we're doing with kinesiology. So first thing is to understand where we work. And that's important because we should, you know, kinesiology is a wonderful tool, but we can't say we do everything. You know, we must understand what our limitations are. Because people claim we can do this and this, we get put on quack watch, you know. But if we understand we can work with hyperarousal, that's fair. And if we use that and do studies on targeting that, well, then we can show it works. And I really like the psychologist's way of doing studies, because they don't do double bind, triple bind. They do questionnaires before and after. How do you feel? I mean, that's good for kinesiology. And they do these questionnaires that are recognised, and they implement them. They can show if there's a statistical significance, publish the paper, then it's accepted. I think that's a good route for kinesiology myself. It would fit right into what we do. A lot of people try and think we can do it in the medical model. I disagree. I think we're more suited to the psychological model. And it's recognised, and the medical model actually recognises the psychological model, so, yeah. So, I just mentioned this because you were all writing down, but, so first hypothesis, kinesiology works on the obstacle of hyperarousal. So when the hyperarousal is toned down, the traumatised person can begin to resolve the other obstacles.
Do you mean a particular mode or type of kinesiology?
No.
Or
Any type of kinesiology.
tell me, I need to know what you mean by that. Any type of kinesiology can work on the hyperarousal?
Well, if someone's in a state of hyperarousal, you balance them for that state. If they're in that constant state of vigilance, people with if you've got someone with post-traumatic stress disorder, they're like, you know, like this. So that's what you work with. We do energy. I mean, all kinesiology is energy work. So to me, I mean, I use my system, and Alexandra's used EnKA very successfully in her clinic, working with the hyperarousal. So we know that what we do works, but I think it doesn't matter what modality you're using, because we're basically working with the energy systems anyway. So working with the energy systems to tone down the hyperarousal. So, I mean, you can try it. I mean, if it works, it works. I mean, that's all we have to worry about. And the second hypothesis, which I've already mentioned too, is that the traumatic event is a severe condition of stimulus. It's a hypothesis because it's not proved yet, but it's okay to have a hypothesis, because then it gives you something to test. So if we put forward a hypothesis, we've got something to test. Okay?
Can you give an example of that? Can
Well,
you
like
clarify what you mean by a severe condition?
Well, that would be, say, someone was in a war and there was a scream of, I don't know, like a tank tracks or something like that. So any time they heard something like that, they're like, ah, you know, something like this. I mean, I gave a more benign example before about a snake in a tree.
Okay.
Or another example I often use is a red car almost runs you over. Next time you see a red car, you're like,
Okay.
you know, that's a more...
Thank you.
That's what it's for. You know, these traumas, we inflict them on ourselves.
Right.
It's a product of our society. Okay, so what I'm going to show you now is, I don't know how much all of you know about the brain, but in the limbic system, there's a part of the brain called the amygdala. Now, if I'm going to say in a general way, what's the overall thing it does? Its main function is it monitors all sensory information and decides if there's an emotional charge to be put on it. And if it is, if it says yes, well, then you get the experience of an emotion, which could be like, you know, your muscles tensing and all this. It then tells the hippocampus, you better remember that. So hippocampus is to do with memory, so it puts a charge there, and then it'll go into long-term memory. Okay? So what I'm going to show you is some of the internal functioning of the amygdala. Now, normally, when you've got a neutral stimulus, you have this on page 6 of your thing. Now, normally you get a neutral stimulus, sensory information, always comes into the thalamus and then goes to the cortex. And in the cortex is where you process things on a higher level. The thalamus also will pass it over to the amygdala. Now, if the amygdala says, well, that's just a boring piece of information, I'm not interested, it stops. And we have to do that because we take in like millions of pieces of information through our sensory systems every day. So we have to gate it. I mean, how much do you keep? We only keep a small percentage of it, and most of it's discarded because if we kept it all, our brain would overload. And what's the point of remembering I was driving behind a blue car yesterday for like 20 miles? I mean, who cares? I mean, I don't really need that. What's that going to do for my life? I don't know if I drove behind a blue car for 20 miles because I don't remember what colour cars I was driving behind, you know, because my amygdala said, that's boring, get rid of that. And of course, we've got all kinds of sensory information, visual, auditory, smell, taste, touch, all coming in and all gated by the amygdala. Kathy?
I just want to point out that the journals are in black and white. So as he's going through these charts, you may want to make a note in your journal as to what's red and blue, because I see he's using color in his descriptor.
Oh, yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, the blue ones have actually got an arrow on it. Okay, yeah. All right. And the red ones have got a dot. But anyway. So that's what would normally happen. Now, if you've got a conditioning, you've got, let's say, an aversive stimulus, like I saw a snake, and so that information together with the neutral stimulus, which is I saw a tree, go to the amygdala, and the amygdala says that is dangerous. So it passes over to another part. These are all parts of nuclei within the amygdala. So there's another one, they've got what's called a fear neuron. And this neuron says, it is whenever there's fear, it's active. Okay? And it goes over here to the central nucleus, which is the output nucleus of the amygdala. And so it goes to the output neuron, and the output neuron then tells the rest of the body, you know, do all the things you do when you experience fear, which is, you know, activate your adrenal glands, raise your blood pressure, tense your muscles, change your breathing, speed up your heart rate. All these kind of things are driven out of there. And I call them the outputs of the PAG because the PAG's a part in the brainstem which is like the conductor of all this. It makes everything happen in a synchronised way and gives you the experience of experiencing fear. Okay? And with other emotions too, but we're just picking on fear here. So then what happens is that the next time you see the neutral stimulus, it goes to the amygdala and it says, oh, I remember this was dangerous. It now says this is a dangerous thing. It sends it to the fear neuron's activated, it goes to the output neuron, and you experience fear again. And now you're conditioned. So the second time you went to go to an apple tree, the next time you go to the apple tree after you've seen the snake, you're experiencing fear. Like, but then you've got your drive, like your motivation, because you're hungry. Like, oh God, there's apples there, so you still want to go there, but you're like, so you've got these two things, so you're careful. Which is good because if there's no steak, you can take the apples back, and you know you can all sit around with the EnKA tribe, say, and have apples. Okay, so the next thing is how to extinguish fear. And you have nearby these neurons called extinction neurons that in a contextual basis, you can learn that, okay, this particular apple tree has no snakes. So these red dots, they're GABA neurons. Now, GABA is an inhibitory neurotransmitter. So they activate the GABA neurons that go to the fear neurons and turn them off. But also inhibits, you've got like GABA projections within the amygdala turning off the output as well. And thus, you go to that one apple tree and there's no fear. So knowing this now, in EnKA we have systems of like, well, we use formatting, so we have all different formats. We can go into the different parts. And on what formats do, formats are like keys to stress on a particular part of the body. And it's like, you can, you know, with reflexology is like a holographic way of treating your organs and glands. Formats do the same thing. You can access stress on very specific parts of our anatomy, and thereby, if you put together the pathway, you can format that whole pathway and remove the stress from it, thereby enabling the system to do that better. Okay. Now, there's other ways to do it. Formatting uses acupoints and finger modes, so it works on an etheric domain. You can use, like the lady yesterday had test kits. They're usually done with radionics. That's another way. It's a different frequency. Okay, you can find one or the other will show and the other one doesn't. And it depends on the frequency. I like the formatting way because etheric is very close to the physical body. It's the next level up from the physical body. So you can get a real subtle way of reading the stress within very specific parts of the anatomy. And like we can go down to specific receptors, or, you know, the specific enzyme, or even the quarks in a carbon atom in a specific neurotransmitter. If you need to go down that far, it's possible. Okay, so that's how the conditioned stimulus works. So the next is okay, that's the theory. What about the practical side? You know, how do we translate this into kinesiology? And how can I show you something that you can use? And this technique is for a deficiency in water, so you don't necessarily have to use it for trauma. You can use it for people who just might be very fearful, or if you think their water element's under energy, you can use this technique that I'm going to show you today. Okay, so now, first of all, there's this. Well, they're the different sensory receptors in the thalamic nuclei that they're involved. So we also, you know, we format each individual part, so it's all part of the pathway you can create for extinguishing fear. Now, I just want to talk a little bit about stress. I know most of you, I'm probably telling you something you already know, but that's okay. We've got the 3 stages of stress. Most people are aware of that. There's the model from Hans Selig, who up until 2 weeks ago, I thought he was Austrian because he did all his work in Vienna, but I was in Hungary and they corrected me. He's Hungarian. Sorry. They were really like, oh, he's Hungarian. Okay, you know. Like, that must be an Austro-Hungarian thing I figured out later. Still a bit of, you know. But now, how do we assess that? The kinesiology, we can assess stress, and we use the indicator muscle, and it's a wonderful tool. And the way I see it is the indicator muscle will indicate the level of stress. So there's 4 responses, and I know those of you who've done AP will have 7, but I don't distinguish between, you know, over-facilitated or under-inhibited. It's still the same thing. It still shows you the same thing. They are different states, but you still got the same meaning. So first, there's no change to the indicator muscle, no stress. Now, assuming you've got a locked muscle, the indicator muscle is locked, and when you sedate it, it will unlock. And then you can lock it again. Then you can unlock it and lock it. And I always, when I'm testing an indicator muscle, I'll do it 4 or 5 times because you can get a sneaky stress. It'll show you okay for 1 or 2 sedations. Then after the 3rd or 4th, it'll go, oh, you know, it just kind of hides itself. So you should be able to sedate and tonify it 5, 6, 10 times and it works fine. And I always do that because, you know, especially if you get an indicator muscle, it doesn't feel quite right. I call it the rusty gate because it's like when you swing a rusty gate, it's like, it's sort of technically working, but it's not quite right. And then you do it 3 or 4 times and it can't do that, and then it'll let go. Okay, so then you've got the indicator change, which you know, assuming you've got a locked indicator, the indicator muscle goes to unlock, but you can tonify it. And usually if you use priority mode and it's a priority, it'll come up to lock. And that's the first stage of stress. Then you've got over-facilitation, which is the second stage, and this is where the indicator muscle's locked. I call it the iron bar. You get, you know, these people and their indicator muscles like that, and you push down on it and you cannot move it. You put all your weight on it and it will not move. It's just totally jammed and you cannot sedate it. And this was something that Richard first recognised with his idea of powers of stress, because he would do, you know, he would just keep stacking the sedations, you know, doing it a very physical way. Then Ian Stubbings came along and said, oh, let's do it with acupoints. And so he did it with acupoints. It's just a different way of doing it. And Richard also did it with magnets, stacking the magnet in. So that means it locks and you can't sedate. Then you've got the third stage, which is under facilitation, and that's when it goes collapse. You know, you put whatever it is and it just goes, and you cannot tonify it. It's just like, it's the exhaustion phase. So the indicator muscle can tell us what level of stress we've got, and that's interesting to know because when you do a pathway, you can see that one bit might have more stress than the other. And that helps you interpret the balance because you can say, well, I always note what level of stress there was, but also what I used to get rid of the stress, because that's important too. Whether I use maybe some fear system, or you can pulse a chakra to get rid of it. Say if you pulse the throat chakra and that gets rid of the powers of stress, then we can say, well, there was a communication issue going with the stress on that, because it tells you more information. So how you interpret the powers of stress is important. I think it's very important and very important part of interpreting the balance later when you discuss it with your client. Okay, so that's how we can assess stress. Just a quick little neurology of an indicator muscle. A muscle test is a neurological event. And it was developed by physiotherapists, Kendall and Kendall. And, you know, later it was taken up by George Goodhart and he connected it to meridians and thus was born kinesiology. But basically you've got, now the stress can be in any level of the brains, and looking at the triune brain, you start with the cortex, which is their higher brain, so that's our conscious brain. So that is, yeah, I can see an apple tree and that's stressing me out. And I test the muscle, whoops, it's weak. You know. So that means you can identify it. Then that gets sent to the limbic brain, which basically the limbic brain is memories and emotions. So often if the stress arrives here, it could be some subconscious thing you're not even aware of. Someone said something and you snap in an emotional way, you don't even realise what it is. And then it goes down to the brainstem where you've got the PAG and the outputs of the PAG, and there you've got, you know, really unconscious deep stuff. So if your stress arises there, it's really unconscious, very deep. And they're obviously the most important ones to work with because they're often the really life-driving issues that people have a really hard time even understanding what it is because it's so unconscious. And then that goes down, you know, very simply I can say that part of the brain then affects the reticular formation, or the part of the reticular formation that controls how our muscles move, and then it then makes the indicator muscle go weak or strong or whatever. It's neurological. It's completely neurological and can be explained very easily by understanding how the neurology works. Okay? So anyone who says muscle test is wooey-wooey, it's not true. It's a neurological event. It's just how we interpret it and how people use it is very strange, you know. It is. I mean, there's, you know. And that's what gives kinesiology. I mean, I remember once I read in the paper when I was a student, a kinesiologist muscle tested that their client had cancer, muscle tested that the cancer was gone, and told them to go off their medication, and then their client died. And I mean, and so they were using in the muscle test, oh, you've got, you know, to diagnose, which is not a diagnostic tool.
The paper was published where?
I was in a newspaper article.
Oh.
You know, in Australia, someone stuck it up on the wall in my college, and I'm like, oh God, I'll never forget that. I mean, how ridiculous! No wonder we get a bad name. You know, people like that. Now, before we go, and I explain to you, just this is the model. This is the balanced triangle. This is my triangle, and I figured that, you know, every school of kinesiology's got their own triangle, so here's mine. 3 points on it, obviously. 1, you've got the energetic structures, and I've just put them all in there. Chakras, I mean, I'm just the chakra guy, and meridians as well, but I really like to work with chakras. But it also can be aura, etheric web, or figure eights, or anything like that. It's an energy body. You've got the psychological part, which is your thoughts, emotions, belief systems, all kind of that. And then you've got the physical anatomy and physiology. I'll put the whole physical body into one. So for instance, this model can explain a 14 muscle balance. You set a goal. That's the psychological part. You test muscles. That's the effect in the body. You correct meridians. That's the energetic part. Okay. So I used to call it the treatment triangle, but, you know, it's a bit not politically correct to use that. I mean, even though treatment triangle sounds so great, I was convinced we had to change it to the balanced triangle. So it's now called the balanced triangle, but anyway, it's just a name. And it's a model too, so. Okay, so now to understand this, we have to understand how energy flows. Now, again, this is probably stuff most of you know. Oh, these pictures are not in there. But anyway. So balanced energy flow, like in a meridian, energy flows in the meridian in the correct amount when it's appropriate. That is balanced energy flow. If there doesn't need to be much energy flowing and there isn't much energy flowing, then that's balanced. If there needs to be a lot of energy flowing and there is, that's balanced too. Same with chakras. And chakras have a yin and yang aspect. Chakras, to me, are centres for energy exchange. We exchange energy with each other. Right now, we're throat chakra. I'm yang in my throat chakra expressing it. You're yin taking it in. That's communication, see? That's the energy of communication. Is saying what it is you want to say and also hearing what other people have to say. Okay? So when it's balanced, they work properly. So if my throat chakra is in balance now, I could just be here going, or not explain myself very, very well, or talk a load of cobblers or whatever. Or if yours was, if you couldn't hear or understand what I'm saying, or just can't get it, it might be an imbalance too. But if I'm talking cobblers, well, then it's not an imbalance. I'm the one in balance, you're not. Okay? So if you're not supposed to receive energy and you don't, that's balanced. Okay? It's when it's appropriate. Yep.
Does this chart imply, when you show the chakra in the yang aspect, are those arrows going into the meridian?
No.
They're going into...
No, they're just coming out of the chakra. It means you express energy.
Yes.
Like with,
Okay.
every chakra you can express energy, you can receive energy.
Right.
They're centres of energy exchange.
Right. But you're not implying that it's going to...
No, I just fit them all on one page so I
Thank
can
you.
show you at once and not flick through 3 slides.
Okay. Thank you.
Under energy is when it's blocked, so not enough energy is flowing. So you've got the meridian under energy, there you've got chakras under energy. And I love that. Anyone who's done courses with me, I get right into it because, yin under energy in the throat chakra means you're not listening. Or yang under energy in the throat chakra means you can't express what you need to say when it is appropriate for you to say that. That's what it is. Then you've got excessive energy or over energy flow, and that's when there's too much. You know, yang over energy in the throat chakra, blah, 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 blah. Someone who never stops talking, they don't listen, they just keep going, rah, rah, rah. Always got something to say about something, you know. Never stop talking. That's over energy. And yin under energy is, this is the person is, you know, I might say, hi, how are you? And the yin under over energy person will say, oh, wow, you said hi, how are you? But you said that with a certain tone, and because you said it like that, it means when you say that, you don't mean that. What you really mean is blah, 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 blah. So you kind of overanalyze it, twist it, contort it. You know, over energy is just too much energy flow. Like, yin over energy is like the vacuum cleaner. It's like you get the chakra and you go like this. Suck it all in there. You can't get enough. It's very obsessive. Anyone with an obsession has got a yin over energy chakra imbalance, I guarantee it. And every chakra has a distinct energy. So once you understand the energy of that chakra and you find the imbalance, you can completely describe how that person's behaving. It's just one follows the other. And it works every time, you know. And what one of my students noticed, he started using them to set up goals for 14 muscle balances. And he said, you know, like one of the problems he always had was when you got someone is get around someone's defence mechanisms. You know, to really get to the issue, that took a long time. He said, if I use the chakras, we could just cut all through that, you know, because the chakras never lie. People can tell you what they want, but the chakras never lie. So he would use that. And that thus was born Chakra Metaphors course, came from that conference in 2005 in England. Anyway, now, understanding under energy, because we're going to be working with the under energy in the meridian. So imagine that this is a cup, okay? So if we have this cup, and imagine if the cup is full, then that's the normal state of energy, okay? Now, how can you get an under energy state? Well, you can get so this is normal energy. So under energy could be like, well, it just that never fills up enough. So it goes, and this is what you would call under energy, but it's undertonified. Okay? But what if you had a cup that was full and then the energy was pushed away? It was emptied. Now, what's the difference between those cups? They look the same. This one was never filled up, where this one was filled up and then emptied. So that is actually under energy, but over sedated. Okay? So what I'm saying is that when you consider something like a meridian that's under energy, you have to consider whether it is either undertonified or over sedated, because they are different. Because normally, what are we taught? We're taught, oh, it's under energy, we use tonification points to tonify it. Well, what I'm saying is, if it is over sedated, you would use the sedation points, because they are overactive, and you need to bring them down, and then that will tonify it. And it works. And this was kind of a little aha for me. And once I applied this, it totally changed this 5-element work I was doing and really made it a lot deeper, because we were missing half of it, you know. So, now I guess you all know that. I hope. You better. So that's the 5-element diagram. Now, again, when I was recently in the last few years, I wrote some introductory courses when I had the college. And so I wanted to go back to the principles, the basic principles of kinesiology. So I called it Principles of Kinesiology. Very original. But, so what I looked at was I just didn't look at what anyone wrote. I went to all the sources I can find. I was even finding books that were quoting the ancient Chinese texts, and they're the colours of the elements of the ancient Chinese texts. I thought, okay, that's a little bit different to what we've seen, but they're the colours, so I said, I'm going to use those colours, you know. And then what I found is what's called the command points, okay? Now these are the command points for the water element. Now I guess most of you have seen those too, okay? Nothing new. You've got here, here's bladder. Everyone knows what these are, right? Okay, good. And so, and kidney. And here you've got the Shen cycle, which is the creation cycle. And over here you've got the Co cycle, which is the controlling cycle. You know, just make sure you don't go over. So in these, you know, when I went back to the principles, they said, okay, what we use for tonifying and sedating is the Shen cycle points. So if we want to tonify a kidney through the Shen cycle, we'd use the metal point, which is kidney 7, or we use the wood point for sedating it, which is kidney 1. So therefore, kidney 7 is a tonifying point for kidney, and kidney 1 is a sedating point for kidney. And same over here, you've got bladder 67 will tonify bladder, and bladder 65 will sedate. Okay. Now, you've also got what's called the low points, or the connecting points. You've got a number of connecting channels coming from there, but specifically they're used because they connect the yin-yang pair. So there's a low channel between kidney and bladder through the low points. So kidney 4 will send the energy from kidney to bladder. Therefore, kidney 4 sedates bladder, sedates kidney, but tonifies bladder. And bladder 58 sedates bladder and tonifies kidney. Okay. Don't worry, you've got a table on page 14 with all them in, so you don't have to worry about what I'm saying. Now, the other points that are used are source and accumulation points. The source points are where the Jing comes in. So this is the energy from the 8 extra meridians. If the Qi is deficient, it can come in through there. But it must come through triple heater first, because the Jing comes from the 8 extra meridians, goes to triple heater, then the other 11. Therefore, the source point for triple heater can tonify every one of the 12 meridians. Because if that is blocked, it's not going to be distributed to the rest. Because that's where it comes. Triple heaters like the Guardian, it comes into there, then it distributes it. So the source points are tonification points, and the accumulation points are points that are used for sedating, because that is where, if there's excess in the meridian, that's where it congregates. So if you've got excess in a meridian, the accumulation points are used for sedating. Okay. So very simply, you've got this table. Tonification points for bladder is bladder 67, kidney 4, bladder 64, and triple heater 4. Sedation points are bladder 65, 58, and 63. And that's from the principles of Chinese medicine. Okay? And then the kidney points you've got there as well. I won't read them out. Okay. So that's interesting. So how do we know, when do we use the tonification or sedation points? Because I've just said, if a meridian's under energy, we can now attempt to use the sedation points if it's over sedated. So how do we figure it out? Well, it's not hard, because the next thing you'll know is that I use the old light touch, deep touch trick. So if you touch an acupoint with a light touch, it's over energy. If you touch it with a deep touch, it's under energy. So we can now assess the points like this. So if it's under tonified, that means that the tonification points will be under energy. So we test them with a deep touch. So we can, if it's undertonified by metal, that's the Shen cycle, that's bladder 67 and kidney 7, deep touch. So we test them together with a deep touch. And if they show, you know, some people like Tai Chins, I'm a pulsing guy. I like to hold those points and pulse them because you tune into the person's energy. And you would do the bladder 67 and kidney 7, they're there. Well, you can do all 4 because they're all on the foot. You should be able to reach your hand. If you can't reach your hand across for any reason, you do one side, then you do the other side, but you do them together. One side, other side. Okay? If it's undertonified by Yuan Qi, that's the Chinese name for Yuan Qi, that's the Jing from the 8 extra meridians, we will need to use bladder 64, kidney 3 and triple heater 4. Then those guys you're going to have to do on one side because you've got your triple heater 4s here and bladder 64 and kidney 3 are on the foot. So you can just hold them, test them with a deep touch, get the indicator change, you pulse them. One side, other side. And if it's undertonified within the elements, so that's in between each other, if the under energy acts actually an interaction between the two, then the low points will show. So this actually tells you why it's undertonified, okay? And so then you would just test kidney 4 and bladder 58 with a deep touch. Okay? Then if they don't show, well, what I find is that you might find some combinations here and some combinations here. So it might be a mixture, and especially if you've got trauma, they're like totally done. They'll be undertonified and oversedated. Sorry?
I'm guessing that one side could show and the other side wouldn't sometimes?
Yeah, possibly. That's possible. So if you're oversedated by wood, you would test the wood points, which is the Shen cycle, with a light touch. And then if you get your indicator change, you pulse that. Bladder 65, kidney 1. If you're oversedated within the element, it's the low points, same as above, but you're now testing them with a light touch. Before we tested them with a deep touch. So same points. And oversedated by accumulation points, that means the accumulation points are like a plug in a bath. When there's too much, the plug should open, the water should run out. When there's enough, it should close. It means your plug hasn't closed, so everything's going out. So then we would do bladder 63 and kidney 5 with a light touch. All right, so that's the technique. That is the acupressure technique.
So the test is with the deep touch and the pulsing is just holding them?
You just hold them, yeah, because and what you'll find is when you hold those points, you get a really deep energy, and often, you know, the client will go into that really deep, you know, state. I call it the deep state. And I like it when my clients go into the deep state because that's when change is happening on all kinds of level. And that's what we find, this technique. And of course, I've put it together for everything. And I've also done emotions with it because, like the chakras, the meridians have emotions. But, you know, if a meridian is under energy, the emotion is going to be totally different to when it's over energy. Okay. And so, and there's some other stuff. I did some stuff with 5 elements. So I call that course Balancing with the 5 Elements. And I changed it a lot recently, but hopefully it's done now. Okay. But this is one part of it. One part. Yep.
How would you fit this in contextually to working with other brain centers for trauma? Like if doing
this is a correction. So if you're doing a balance with brain centers, say someone's got trauma, what I showed you before, I would do all this formatting, or you could do some other kind of formatting, or any kind of balance that you do, because remember you're working on that state of hyperarousal. What I'm suggesting is you check this for when you come to correct. This is a correction technique. Now I divide the balance up into 4 stages. Okay, you've got the issue. The client comes in. That's what I want to work with, and that's you know, and the client defines it, and that's right because, I mean, it's their session, so they say what they want to work with. Then I what call the setup, which is, you know, the master of setting up was Richard Hutt. He was a genius at it, and I watched him a few times, and I realised how important it is. And I describe the setup as the translation of the client's issue into the language of kinesiology. So if someone comes in and say, I've got a thyroid problem, you might put Terry's Minor, format for thyroid, that's what I would do. You would talk to them. Maybe if they've got just, they're feeling crap, you would talk to them about it, you know, so you can discuss it. I mean, we all do that anyway. Then you've got the balance, which can be whatever. And then you've got the correction. So 4 stages of a balance. So this is really a correction technique that I'm showing you here. To show you a balance in a time like this as a conference is difficult. So I would have a specific balance. I would use my conditioned stimulus balance. And with a conditioned stimulus, you've got the conditioning process, you've got the extinction process, but there's also the recall process because the hippocampus is involved. The hippocampus provides your life context, okay? So when you ever think of what is the context of the apple tree, well, the hippocampus is going to go to long-term memory and say, oh yeah, but you know, this is a new apple tree. Remember the snake last time? Oh yeah. And that's and because it also supplies this is where you filter out all the information, because if the amygdala says that's important, it tells the hippocampus that's important, and it puts it to long-term memory. So all your experiences are coded there. And that's why people with Alzheimer's, they lose the context of who they are. All their life experiences are gone. You meet someone with Alzheimer's, they're like, who are you? I don't know. It's all gone. Hippocampus is totally filled up with these amyloid plaques. And also in the septum too, because you get all this, because acetylcholine comes into the hippocampus from septum, and they've used cholinergic blockers in the hippocampus and reproduce the symptoms of Alzheimer's. So pretty important that too. And that gets destroyed in Alzheimer's as well. Yeah, question?
Is it possible for you to give a succinct definition of what you mean of balance versus correction?
Oh, the balance protocol, you know, for instance, that might be, in my system, it's a series of formats, usually, and holograms on formats and stuff. So, for instance, if it's let's say it's the conditioned stimulus for a visual stimulus. So first I'll format the retina, then I'll format the optic nerve, then I'll format the lateral geniculate nucleus, then I'll go into the amygdala and do all the internal formats there with neurotransmitters and receptors. And then you would look at, if it's then you look at an emotion. There's 3 possibilities with an emotion. Once the amygdala says there is an emotion, you can express the emotion, you can resolve it, or you can suppress it. So each one of those has a distinct neurological pathway because it's all neurology. So then you can figure out which one there you want to do, and just depending on which one, there's a pathway for each one. So you would just follow the format. So you've got these series. So that's like a balancing protocol.
Then now I don't understand the difference between what you mean between setup and balance.
The setup is, okay, say someone comes in and say, I feel crap.
Yeah.
Okay. So, okay, that's their issue. Okay, how do I talk to the person, well, what makes you feel crap? Oh, this and that. So you might discuss it for a while, and then you might set a goal or something like that. That's part of the setup. And then you say, okay, now we know I've set the goal, we've found it, we've dug deep, found the goal. Now we have to balance. So now we then implement the balancing protocol, and with neuroenergetic kinesiology, we just do it. We've got many things, you know, it could be neural emotional, it could be immune system, it could be endocrine, it could be biochemical, it could be toxicity, it could be pathology, it could be physiology, it could be neurotransmitters, it could be structure, it could be primitive reflexes. They're all balancing protocols. Okay. Each one has, this is a physiological pathway, here are the formats. And as I said before, formats are like keys to stress. So you might have a pathway and you put one in, no stress, another one, a little bit of stress, another one, a lot more stress, another one, huge amounts of stress, and you spend half an hour de-stressing that format.
Okay.
And then but If you went directly to it, it wouldn't show because you need the context of the other steps before. Like if you read one of the most beautiful poems ever written, and it's got love in it, if I just say love, it's just a word. But if you read love in terms of this beautiful poem, it has a much different meaning. Much different meaning.
So you are diffusing, in your balance phase, you are diffusing what you find as you go.
As you go, and that's the power.
Is something else.
Yes, and that's the power of this technique, is actually diffusing the stress. And that's why the method of de-stressing is important, because it tells, and I always write it down, and you go, this step I de-stress like this. So when you come later, say, well, we had a lot of stress in the throat chakra, we had the fear system show up, and then, you know, so there was issues with communication, fear, then maybe solar plexus chakra, issues with respect or power or something like this. And that is then can be discussed in terms of the client's issue and helps them understand it better. Okay. So I always see it's very important how you de-stress things.
Thank you.
Yep, no worries. Okay. How much time have we got left now?
A good half an hour.
Good half an hour, cool. So this was my talk, but since I've got an extra half an hour, now I can, what?
Oh, I thought you were going to ask for a volunteer.
I am going to ask for a volunteer, so I'm going to demonstrate the system and show you how it works. So what is your issue?
I was present in the death of my partner of 8 years, and I know that I had post-traumatic stress disorder, and I'm sure that I still have vestiges of it that I'm carrying.
Okay. That's a risky one because it could end up being a very deep balance, but that's okay.
Well,
Let's
it's
try.
okay if you don't want to do it.
No, it's okay. So this is the balancing. We use formatting to identify stress. We can balance the chakras as a balancing tool because that's then psycho-spiritual balancing. If the chakras are the balance, not just the correction. Emotional balancing. And there's some of the physical balancing systems that we can use. Okay. Yep.
Could you repeat what you said? I didn't.
Oh, hang on a sec.
No, I'd like
Hang
you
on.
to repeat what you heard.
Oh, what did I hear? She was present at the death of her partner of 8 years, and so she thinks she might have some post-traumatic stress or some vestige or something there as a result of being present when her partner died. Okay, which has got to be a stressful event. Because that would then, you know, all that bonding information and everything like that would come kicking in big time. Okay, so head there. Oh, it should be okay. Just want to make sure your head's not in the data projector. Okay, that's okay. Okay, so issue is present at death of client. Okay, so partner. Oh, that was Freud. She's experienced that as well. Okay, so then the setup, we wouldn't use anything physiological for this. It would be more like a discussion. I'm not going to do a big discussion like normally in the client. You might actually spend half an hour discussing it with it, depending on what kind of skills that you use. A quick way to help me set a goal for this will be just to use a chakra metaphor to do that. So I'll just get you to think of that. Okay. So she's thinking of it, and we've got... So the indicator muscle now will not tonify, so we've got third stage of stress. So I'm going to look how I'm going to de-stress it, and I'm just doing it with the neural emotional pathways. And it's coming up the panic system, which is separation distress. So that makes sense. So I'm just going to pulse these points, and this is from the neural emotional pathways. There's a technique for de-stressing according to primary emotions.
What points are you? I can't see.
governing 20, 24, and large intestine 20. Okay, and I'm just going to do the governing 23 and gallbladder 1s to seal it off. Okay, now to help me set the goal quickly so I don't have to do a lot of talk, I'm just going to go and do the chakra metaphor. So I'll just hold chakra mode and I'm just going to go around the alarm points, light and deep touch. And they're actually the indicator points for the alarm point. Oh. Okay, pericardium deep touch as a priority. Okay, take the circuit. So pericardium deep touch, pericardium relates to the brow chakra. It's the yin aspect of the brow chakra and it was deep touch, so it's under energy. So yin under energy in the brow chakra, the meaning of that very quickly is not learning from your experiences, making the same mistake over and over again. Okay? Does that make sense to you in any way? Yes? Okay. So we can quickly frame that as a goal, is that I can learn from my experiences, so that.
I can learn from my experience.
Okay, so now I've set it up for her. That's a quick way to do it. And again, we've got powers of stress. It's not the naps. Just try chakra. It's the crown chakra. So the crown chakra is the spiritual gate. So this is about receiving the divine energy and also becoming, that's the yin aspect. The yang is expressing it in your life, like becoming an expression of that. Okay? So we've got stress on, like around this, behind this stress of we've got stress of the separation distress, but also stress in the crown chakra, which is the divine connection. Okay? Or oneness, the one. Of course, when you're fully in there is no separation because there's only one. Okay? So, does that make sense for you? Okay. Take the circuit. So now we've really gleaned a lot of information just from doing the powers of stress on setting up her issue. Okay? So now we would come to the balancing protocol, and obviously I'm not going to be doing all that kind of thing, so I'm going to quickly go through a few things to see what it could be. I'll just try the naps first, and that's a priority. Okay, let's see. Is it okay. Ooh, interesting. Okay, so, and again, that is the seeking system. Take the circuit, which I wouldn't have thought, but the seeking system is about motivation. It's about the drive to go forward. So this is what is commonly called in neurological terms the reward system, but I use the Panksepp model of understanding emotions. He called it the seeking system. So this is like the drive to get food, the drive to get, clothes, a nice house to live in. It's basically motivation. Okay. So how's your motivation levels?
Stressed.
Stressed, yeah. Okay, so this is the actual balance we need to do. Take the circuit. Now, normally, the seeking system, just a quick neurological, it's dopamine pathways from the ventral tegmental area in the midbrain that goes up to the nucleus accumbens, which is your basic reward pathway. Also goes to the amygdala, orbitofrontal cortex, lateral hypothalamus, and up to the cortex. They're the main parts of the seeking system. Now, that would normally take half an hour, 45 minutes, just to go through all those formats, de-stress neurotransmitters. So what I'll do is I'll just do a couple of the most important formats here, which the first one's going to be the ventral tegmental area, because that's where the dopamine comes from. So I'll just do that format. It's midbrain plus 15. And then I want to do physiology and governing 16, which is pleasure. So I'm just going to pulse that. And you can kind of pulse this for a while. I like to pulse it because you really get the energy flowing. And so you want to activate the dopamine pathways from the ventral tegmental area, because that's your basic seeking system. It goes up to the nucleus accumbens. That's the same pathway that's used in addictions. It's such a powerful system. All the addictive drugs work on that pathway. In one way or another, the effect is to increase dopamine levels. All of them except for marijuana. Has another way of working. Maybe just chuck in dopamine quickly. Okay, it's over-facilitated now, the dopamine. So the ventral tegmental area was very deep. So now we've got the dopamine with over-facilitated. I need to diffuse. Okay. Base chakra. So I'm just going to pulse the base chakra. That is like who you are. It's, it's the chakra of identity, how you fit in the world. It's the tribal chakra. It's the chakra of the family, of the, what's your path in your life? Do you know where you belong? Do you live where you belong? All these kind of things are issues of the base chakra. So that tells us important information now around the dopamine. So this loss of motivation in the dopamine production has issues connected to the base chakra, because that's how we're distressing it. So it's quite interesting to understand how. That's why I think the understanding how you diffuse the stress is important. So I'll just use that for the balance. Normally I'd probably check the nucleus accumbens as well, because that's the ventral tegmental area. Nucleus accumbens is the heart of it. Okay. But I've only got limited time here, and I think we've really activated a lot anyway. So I'll go directly to the balancing phase. So there's many ways to balance, your correction phase. And of course everyone has their own correction techniques. It could be a chakra. I'll check, is it a chakra? Is it a minor chakra? Is it an out-of-body chakra? Is it 5-element acupressure? Oh, 5-element acupressure. And it's a priority. Okay, good. So I'll take the circuit. So now we're going to correct with 5 elements. So I have to now test the elements. Now I use the 5-element navel mode. So I just go around, where's your navel? Yeah. So you've got these indicator points. I just use them individually. We can go wood element, light touch, deep touch. Okay. Fire element, is it light touch over energy, deep touch under? Earth element, light touch, deep touch. Metal, light touch, deep touch. Water, deep touch. Okay, under energy and water. Well, lucky us.
That worked out.
Take the circuit. So, huh?
You can pay me later.
Finish.
Okay, so I've got the acupressure for trauma here, which just so happens to be the ones we're going to use. So, now I can go around testing all these points. So hopefully I can remember them all. Bladder 67 and kidney 7 deep. undertonified by Yuan G. Bladder 64, kidney 3, and triple heater forward deep touch. 64, kidney 3, triple heater forward deep. Bladder 58, kidney 4. Okay, that one's showing, so we need to pulse that. So, so that's undertonified within the element. Okay. Okay, then you've got over-sedated, so we need to do the light touch. So, over-facilitated. So I'm not going to worry about de-stressing. I could just feel these points as I touch them. See, normally we'd miss that. We'd miss doing these sedation points because we wouldn't consider that it could be over-sedated. Especially the kidney 1. Wow. Kidney 1's really pumping. That's why I like to hold the points, because you can tune into the energy. So intimate. Not this side so much. It was. Okay, so then we've got over-sedated. We had these points show before. Let's see if they show again. Sometimes they do. No. 63, 5. So that's how it works. So that's the 4th stage of a balance. And I'll always let my client chill as much as you want, because the energy really shifts. And sometimes at the end of the balance, if you stand and your client lies there for 10 minutes, to me that's part of the balance, because the energy is moving. And that's okay to do that. How are you feeling? She's got her eyes open, so I'll ask her. Sorry? Yeah. You lay there for a minute, that's okay. So,
What did she say?
she just wants to lay there for a minute. And we'll let her lay. So, basically, that's what I've come here to show you. Just a little bit of, I'll just bring this around here. Okay. Balancing. Okay, the college. A bit of a plug for the college. Official colleges, we have one here in the USA with Ron, has licensed the college and running the qualification training programs. And the training program, we've got 3 government qualified, accredited qualifications, and then we articulate with Charles Sturt University in Australia, where you can do all by distance learning, bachelor, master, and even a doctorate if you want in health sciences. They have that qualification pathway through neuroenergetic kinesiology. So, Oh, won't bore you with all the course details, but
Distance learning with this technique?
no. It's just you're with the university. Then once you've qualified, once you've got the advanced diploma, then you leave us and you go to the university. They give you like a 1.5 year credit for the bachelor. You still got to do the other 1.5 years, but all the units are by distance. And then they've got a master's. Everything you can do by distance, and do the exams in your local village even, you know. They have exam centres all over the world. Now, Ron's got a table down there if you want to know more about stuff in the USA or courses or anything like that. So, it's bye-bye from me and Fluffy. So thank you very much for listening to me. How are you feeling? Lightheaded.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I need to spend some time grounding.
Yeah. That can happen,
Processing.
and you have to be aware of that. I once had a student who they let their client leave in this spaced out state. They got in the car and had a car accident. And so this is common what you see. And it's okay, it's because the energy's still shifting. Just sit down, have a quiet moment, let everything come back and just observe it. Just let the energy flow, it comes back. So, no worries.
Okay, thanks.
Thanks. Hug. So great. Don't forget your name. She's the Presidente. Okay, so thanks.
Thank you so much. Awesome as usual. We're going to have a break, and then we're back here, I believe it's 10:45 for the annual general meeting. I hope you all come. We've got some exciting news, new things coming up. So have a break, have some water. Any questions or anything else, just check in with us shortly. Okay?